Well, good evening all. Welcome to the Finance and General Purposes Committee. I will start with the normal agenda. We'll start with 2538, apologies for absence. We have one apology from Councillor Clark, and we're asking to accept his apology, and I'm assuming from learning around the table to make that happen, or allow that to happen. So thank you. Item 2539, declarations of interest. To receive and consider the declarations of interest from members under Section 50 of the Local Government Act. I'll take them both together. 3901 to declare any disclosure of pecuniary interests, and 3902 to declare any other interests. Mike?
I've got an interest under 254402. Sorry, 01, the Free Teach Festival grant application. It's on the treasurer of OBA, and the money is currently going through the OBA business account.
Thank you. So that's noted. I would also declare interest in the 3902 in my involvement and close involvement with the QBH. These are not to involve myself in that particular grant application, given QBH is a major beneficiary, it's intended to be a major beneficiary.
Sorry, I didn't. What item was that?
Same one as Mike, I think, 25.
Okay.
It could be argued.
01.
It's not pecuniary, it's other interest.
That's the generalised.
Yes. Isn't it covered once you get more dispensation? Well, ordinarily it is, and that's what we're going to say. I had this discussion with Max. We're all members of the trust, so I shouldn't have any further interest or other interest in any other councillor, except I have been more involved than any other councillor in QBH and the acquisition of monies from the ODF for items being spent and to be spent in the ODF, including plans from the current ODF to spend more money on QBH. So if I'm involved in and persuade councillors to invest, it could be argued that I'm overstepping that authority because of my closeness with the QBH management.
Which items is QBH?
Yeah, that's what I don't understand.
Which
The Vintage Festival, which is applying for a grant under item 254401, they have said, and it's been confirmed in the email that's been sent out tonight, that their plan is to invest the surplus from the Vintage Festival into QBH. And given my close involvement with the QBH, my close management of the QBH, and the people.
But you have a dispensation because of being involved with the QVH and being a councillor.
What I'm saying is my involvement is more than most, and I think it would be wise to step outside that discussion because my involvement in management is more than any other councillor on this council. So I will step out, and I think it's also right that councillors know that my involvement with it means that I know what's going on more than the ODF, and most councillors do. And I think we just need to be transparent.
So are you?
I accept dispensation, but I still think
Yeah. So is this another interest or to close?
Other interests.
You don't know that one, right, okay.
Human interest.
Mhm.
Personally, I do have other interests. Personally.
Okay.
Item 2540, representation from interested parties. Single man. We can also skip over item 2541, which is consideration of requests from interested parties. So move on to item 2542, minutes of the previous meeting. Any questions or comments on the minutes of the previous meeting? No. Okay. In that case, could I have a proposer that we accept these minutes? Councillor Adams, could I have a seconder? Councillor Shearer, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Signal.
Oh, no, sorry, it's clear in my throat.
2543 is received the monthly accounts for March 2026. With much 12 accounts for the year ending March 2026. Any comments on those items, James?
So, implicit in the year-end accounts, which, having had a quick chat with, all of these aren't.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, but not the final. We have a position on our reserves going into the year. We have operated the council for a year, achieved a deficit or surplus as it turns out. We have also produced a budget for the new financial year with £110,500 of releases from reserves. I think there needs to be an activity to say which reserve is being spent from which of our future things, and also are all the accrual amounts for the year ending appropriate, and is it distributed appropriately? And I have a question really. Is that happening here today, or is there another finance meeting where the year-end accounts are presented prior to the AGAR being completed, or never been through the year-end process? How does it work?
No. Do you want to talk to that? How do you do this?
Yeah, so obviously, as Paul has said, we're near enough, it's close, but it's not finalised, and you've given yourself a cut-off date.
in the next week.
Yeah.
First of all, I'll go to the year end and I'll download everything for the AGAR, complete the AGAR to make sure all the figures are correct, and then I'll discuss it with Emma. And at that point, we will be speaking to our internal auditor and go through it all. And at that point, as long as she is happy, Emma's happy, then it will come to full council
In May.
Does the AGAR differentiate between the use of reserves, or does it hold
No.
just a reserves?
Just holds one figure.
That's what I thought. Thanks.
To try and answer James's important question at the end, I think I'm essentially agreeing with Paul and Emma, and that is I would defer some of that discussion to a future meeting when we've actually got, should we say, hopefully a finalised set of accounts, because otherwise we will probably be having a pass over.
would that be the May full council?
The May full, well, I don't know whether you want to have the May, what we normally do at that May meeting, because obviously there's a lot going on. We received the internal audit report, and hopefully there's nothing on that we need to address. We complete the AGAR, so you complete, or sign everything off, tick all of those boxes, then that is done with regards to end of year. Now, what's on there is not going to be affected for how you talk about your reserves and.
But the auditor should be checking that our reserves are appropriate and whatever, and we'll be applying the best practices, which would say for a council of our size, we should have no more than 3 months in general reserves, and that earmarked reserves are appropriately reviewed, etc.
There's no defined 3 months, 6 months at all.
As long as you don't tell me.
I mean, there's lots of figures banded around, and it always used to be 3 months, but it's not held, that if you've got £100,000 more than that, there's something wrong.
I think also there's something in the rules which says that the size of the council and the size of the council responsibilities also has an impact
Yeah.
on the reserves being held. My thinking is that there are 2 issues here. One is about process and time, and the other is about good practice. And the 2 should be together, right? I think what James is talking about is questions that I've got on here, which is if we're going to refinance this, that's going to affect the revenue reserves we've got.
Mhm.
Because the assets are valued at 2.8 and our liabilities are still somewhere. In fact, they're on there. If you go up for the balance sheet, you've got asset reserve 2.7 million, brought forward reserve 122,000. So the level of our asset reserves is reflective of our total property assets. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to be sorted out. I don't think we can sort it out tonight simply because there's been no pre-warning of this level of discussion. I really don't think, frankly, that the full council, particularly in May, is a time to have that discussion because most councils will look to the FGP to bring forward a proposal. And there isn't an FGP in May, the next FGP is June.
Mhm.
So my thinking is that we carry on the process that we've got, we're not doing any evaluation of any assets, we carry the process that we've got, the AGAR only shows reserves. It doesn't show reserves for running the business. The council doesn't show other reserves earmarked for replacement assets or anything like that. So my proposal is to carry on as normal for this month, for this meeting, I'm sorry, and for May. But in the June FGP, if we want to get this happening properly, we would propose something for the project. I can do that, James can do that, anybody can do that, which says here's how we treat the balance sheet, here's how we manage our reserves for the year ending March 2027. So that's what I'm thinking. James, I know you're not.
As long as it happens, I think that's all cool. The question I then have though is when next week we need to make a decision about releasing some reserves, which reserve is it coming from and how do we know if we've not already spent it if we've not allocated it? Probably because it comes from general reserve, I suppose.
Just had one number. Paul showed an allocation of 47.8,000. It will have to come out of general reserves because we haven't defined it adequately.
That's what I was going to say. At the moment, we just have one fund. The only defined amount of money in that is the money for Fletton Field, which is ring fenced for Fletton Field. But the rest of it is general reserves.
So what are figures in the budget spreadsheet on the reserves page where you've got £5,000 for election reserve, £8,000 in capital reserve, the Fletton Field amount, 190 something in general reserve, and then 290 something in buildings RLM earmarked reserve. So,
So that's what the figures.
no, I'm talking the tab to the left of the one you're in, S16 and reserves. So available 25, 26. We've got a revenue reserve of 194.5, a property RLM 222, Turn Road Ashton, which I'm assuming
That's Fletton Field.
Fletton Field one. Then you've got capital sales of 8941. Now I accept that that's got restrictions on what you can use it for, but I don't think it's separate necessarily to property and RLM. There's the underpin from the ring at the top for £47,000 that was never actually released this current year, I believe.
Yeah.
So that needs to get folded back into presumably property RLM.
Well,
I don't think it's accurate to say the reserves are all in general reserves because there is this piece of paper that clearly contradicts that.
Because this figure will change when I know how much is left from.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It will end for the end of the year,
Yeah.
but
And then
unless what we're saying is that was the beginning of the year, they were allocated out. The end of the year decision taken at some point is that it will all just get bashed into one fund, which I'm not aware of.
The old practice is at the end of the year, so this is, my involvement is in the surplus. That just gets brought into the overall reserves.
Yeah.
And so the way I see this working is we've got a commitment or agreement as part of the budget. The budget is the decision, budget is simply an allocation. 47.2, we don't need to transfer the
No, that was the year past.
So when we finish the year declaration and the AGAR,
At that point, you don't know how much funds are left over, and that's what everything has to balance to.
yes,
And after those balances, something like the elections already cast in stone. The amount of revenue reserve, which is 3 months to 6 months worth of expenditure, and so on, all those will then, the balance that is left will be one which you need to then decide how
Yeah.
you want to distribute.
Yeah.
But it's all defined by, when I do the AGAR, there'll be a figure at the end of it.
Sure. But it's the process of taking that AGAR figure.
Yeah.
And allocating it to those lines that I'm asking, when does that happen?
I'll do that sooner.
So on what basis did you decide to have 194,500 in revenue reserve?
If I didn't decide, full council or
Yeah,
finance and general purposes.
decided.
Okay.
And it's based on the
So
information.
when did they decide?
it's a decision, James, as part of the overall process. As you can see there on the fourth line, for last year's total expenditure is 777. 3 months, that's 12 months, so 3 months is that divided by 4, is 194. So the figure that Paul puts in is simply a calculated number from the decision the council made when it created its budget last year. That's just a process, that's just
Yeah.
a spreadsheet, it's just a calculation. And so the balance, what you could argue about, and what I would like to do, whether it's June or September, or the next one, the next one FGP is more rigorously determine what the additional reserves are over and above the revenue reserve, which at 3 months is a simple calculation of what we need to do.
Can I reflect back what I've heard to make sure that everything,
Yeah.
and you can tell me what I've heard wrong. So for the end of the financial year just ending,
Yeah.
we're going to allow the end of year process as it stands to run. Paul will just grind the handle and whatever comes out, comes out. He will allocate whatever surplus or deficit to whichever pot applies.
Yeah.
But at some point early in the new current financial year, FMGP will review those allocations and the rules for allocating stuff so that we're happy about moving from the end of year that Paul's going to produce into a revised start of year based on the expectations that we have for this current year. Okay.
And the only thing I'd add to that is that is dependent on the paper being produced, which allows members of this group, this committee, and the clerk, and the finance officer to have a look and say, here's what we think is right, here's what we think is practical, here's what we think is legal and appropriate. Because if we start the debate as we have tonight with what should we do, we're going to end up at 9:30 with no decisions being made other than we've all fallen out because nobody's got the real proposal to make. So whether that proposal is drafted by you, James, or by me, or by the new head of working or by the new chair of FGP, it does need to be done. And I would rather, it won't be my call because I won't be chairing this committee next year, I would much rather that was done against a paper which are now reasoned discussion because the paper has been rationally put on the process. That only change to your summary.
Yeah, I agree with that, John. The only thing that I would remind people of is that we do, at the end of May, have an annual town meeting. And we may need to be able to answer questions from the public around similar topics.
And forgive me, I think the answer is the same as we've just given, which is we have a reserves figure. Of that figure, 3 months is held in our revenue reserve because we need to hold that to according to regulations. The balance is there for replacement assets and extraordinary expenses. And I wouldn't really recommend we go into more detail on that.
And I'm kind of happy with that as long as we are collectively happy with that.
Yeah.
Pointing out that, you know, we will be potentially holding to account.
We would be in their position to actually say these what they thought, rather than just think, but on that basis, the other concern I have is that if anybody comes to council and says, I would like to spend X amount of money out of reserves, but we don't know what that reserve figure is, it's a bit unwise. So we should be cautious about spending reserves we don't know the number of, because we already know there's a number of commitments made, because the Max is good work last year, and they are up to quite a lot of their own. Now, whether there's enough left, David's point that were asked, before that. So that would be my concern. If we're cautious about saying, I will take it from reserves, because that's a very easy thing to do, and it can add up to a lot of money that we don't know about until June or whatever.
Agreed. So are you raised this, James, first of all, are you happy with that as a
You have been, yeah.
I'm not making a proposal, actually, I'm just stating your process. I'm not here to say no.
I raised a query for information and the group has answered thoroughly.
Right, I think the other thing I want to do for this year, if I can, is look at how we allocate spending what I would call capital expenditure. So, for example, if you look on the budget for this year, you will see that Fletton House spending is significantly above budget, way above budget. And it's partly because, get a number
When you say
Sorry,
this year,
yeah.
do you mean last year?
the year that we're looking at, this year on the screen.
Right.
So the year ending March 2026, if you highlight the Fletton House, if you go down, oh, there we are. Yeah, that'll be it. You can see in column G the budget. You see in column F the spend, which is quite a lot different. And a lot of the reason for that is, thank you, is 65 on, well, I've got down here, capex of 82,000. But because we're seeing an operational expenditure budget overspent because of capital expenditure, my own view is that the roads and waters, we have to remember why there's an overspend. We have to recalculate every time we spend money why there's an overspend. So in my view, whether I do it with Paul or with FO, we have to be smarter about how we allocate either term capital expenditure, or we have to properly allocate money in the budget. Because to look at that, anybody would look at that and say, so why are you £76,000 over budget? And you have to move across to G to find out why. That just doesn't smack me of being good practice.
You will recall during the budget process for the new financial year, we have put in specific capex lines wherever the capex has been identified.
We haven't added in the line.
So that was going to be the question to the finance officer about will they have their own
Yes.
line number, which will then enable us to do that. As a point of picking up your further challenge, if during the year we have a new capex come up, right, I don't know, replacing the emergency lights, rather than trying to fold that into the R&M budget and blowing the R&M budget, should that get agreed as a release from reserves by full council, then I think we should see a new line in the expenditure line and a new or an additional amount in the release income line, which then keeps the budget balanced.
Yes, all of that agreement, except for I don't see you line every capex expenditure. I see one line of capex on one line of capex on core, one line of capex.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we will end up in a situation where we have 7 or 8 lines on capex, and it just extends the level of the number of lines.
So would you like one line for core towns, one for
for capex on all of our capital assets. So to be clear, Paul, on each line, but just one line, because otherwise, in my view, subject to Emma, who will come in a second, disagree. Otherwise, we'll just end up with a massively long list.
I think if you do it that way, though, you're still going to have questions. So you're still, if you've got a large figure, people are still going to say, well, what was that spent on? So you're still going to have that line along the end.
Yeah, so I kind of agree, but who are the people that will be questioning it? It's council and FGP, and B, it's still much easier to have one capex line for agreed capex or agreed reserves expenditure, because in the picture I've got of how we manage reserves, we will have separate lines showing what has been spent, and that will match back to IM, because otherwise it just becomes massively complicated and then shorter. I'll take Max and then Mike.
I'm not sure I have my hand up, but.
Oh, didn't you?
I-
In that case, I'll ignore you.
I mean, the point is that even if you have one line, you can then deconstruct it if you need to into what's made up that one line. So
Well, you have to, because otherwise how did you get the number of
Yeah.
transfers? So people can't remember these numbers, they've got to be written down somewhere. And there's plenty of lines in our budget with this, so a few more won't do too much damage. What I would say though, is that, isn't it amazing, you can go, let's spend £65,000 on the roof and have enough money for it. Out of thin air.
Well, it comes out of reserves. So. But that's why we need to have a good reserves management policy.
Can I point out that no, it didn't? There was no releases from reserves last year. The overspends in significant capex were funded by underspends on other budget lines to within £7,000 or £12,000. However, the question is, can we rely on having underspends that can cope with £80,000+ worth of unexpected expense? Certainly not this coming year, I suspect.
Which is why I tried to make it part of this year's budgeting process, and I want to refine that for next year to say we will have allocated financial reserves for capex rather than over-allowing budgets in the expectation of underspending them, because we won't always underspend them. I just think it's not transparent to say let's put in 50 because we know that we can spend 30, but we might overspend on something. Because if you've got a budget, people are more inclined to spend it because people see it as a target, not a limit.
Although you say that, but if we keep underspending each year, we're obviously not doing that. If we've got an amount, we're only spending what we need to.
But we're spending it, and the budgeting process, we end up with a surplus more by good luck and good management, I think, if we're not fully budgeting. So if you look down at all those lines, I'm going to curtail this in a second and start to go down other levels. You can have a look at line, thank you. You can look at the courthouse, line 86. We underspent by £10,000. Fantastic. But what if we hadn't underspent by £10,000? What if we had come in, there was £10,000 more on the electricity bill, for example? We might have said, oh, we can spend that because we've got a budget. But
so that's on most things.
Yeah.
I know.
So
And we shouldn't-
£40,000 on staff.
we shouldn't be, well, right, that's a £40,000 in there. And some of those you can budget for, and some of those you can't budget for. Budgeting is not a precise process. But to me, it seems too often the culture that put a budget in. That's the work that Max has done with support from the council. We've got a better sense of what our spend might be than we might in the past. But we'll see when we get the proposal that I'm James will make, or I will make, or we will make, as to how the reserves going forward, and how we cut it, how we account for it, going forward. Just entirely, I think. Any other comments before we?
Well, I just think I've sat here for so many years and heard variations on this debate. And at the end of the day, actually, all you need to do is ensure that you budget realistically. And inevitably, when you deal with a budget of this size, you may end up with underspends in some areas and overspends in others. It's inevitable. Of course, eventually, you may need to point out which your overspend substantially exceeds your underspend in other areas, which is why you have to have reserves. But I think we could get just too hung up on terminology. And I don't actually see a huge problem, almost, with an explanatory note to the side that says, this is what we spent it on. At the end of the day, whether you put that in a single line or in effect in two lines, you're still conveying the same bit of information. That is what we spent, that is why we spent it. So, let's not get too precious about the way in which it appears and just concentrate on budgeting appropriately. I think we did that really well, actually. That's not a criticism. I just think we may be making more of this than we need to. Keep it up. Say it. Oh, keep it up. I'm going to move on. Am I going to move on? Yes, because we're only asked to receive. We're not asked to accept.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm going to move on now to item 254302 to receive information on session 10 and what's required by council this year for AFAR. You all see the documents, are the questions of Emma or Paul. So we move on. Item 2543 and 3 to consider rewriting policy. We ask to decide it or just consider it.
Sorry, John, did I have seen the moment there? I was reading the thing without thinking that we were about to discuss that bit, and we seem to have gone past it.
Well, so if Paul scrolls up,
So,
we can see section 10
Yeah.
there.
It's at the bottom.
Yeah, so section 10, as the paper said, it's around digital data compliance.
Yeah.
We've got in items 3, 4 and 5 the various policies that are part of what needs
That we
to be
need, yeah.
accepted to complete section 10. So my question is, are there any questions by the committee about section 10?
Do you want me to say a little bit? We've got most things. So we've got, email addresses. We've got a website that's accessible. The accessibility statement's been updated. Where is the form? What else have we got? We've got most of it. The only things that we needed was an IT policy, which we hadn't got. So I've stolen from other councils and put together one that I think suits our needs. The draft one that was sent out was about 20 pages long. So I thought I'd make it quite simple. But on the whole, everything's covered, and it's another box now on the AGAR where you've got the boxes where you have to tick yes, and it's just another box at the bottom, and so we just need to comply. And obviously our internal auditor will be looking to make sure that we comply with everything.
Statement uploaded to our website on the 12th of March 2026 by Cuttlefish
Mhm.
says this website is partially compliant.
Yeah. And that's fine.
You know, fully compliant.
No, because we will have old documents on there that are scanned PDFs. They don't expect you to change all of those documents. So what it says is people can contact us. What we will be doing in the future, the signed minutes will not be scanned and uploaded. We will be putting a PDF onto the website, but it's an exported PDF that's saved so that people will be able to read it. And they've said that's fine. We won't need to put signed minutes on the website, but we don't have to change what's on there at the moment.
Because of the work that would be involved
Yeah.
in every single document.
And there will be certain, like the AGAR, we won't be able to. That will have to be scanned.
So sorry, you put PDFs on instead of scan documents. Is that different?
Well, we scan into a PDF, but you can't. What you have to do is now export into a PDF. So you take your Word document, export it into a PDF, and that makes it accessible for people to be able to read. But what we've got on there for however many years before isn't. So what we would do then, if somebody contacts us, we then send them a Word document.
Because of the difference between sketches scanning, which is taking the picture,
Yeah.
and uploading the document into a PDF, because then it can be read.
Mhm.
And particularly if you are sight impaired, a scanned document can't be read, but an uploaded document can. So that makes it more accessible.
But is there an exemption for AGARs in the future? I'm not aware of AGARs having an exemption on that. So how do we do this year's AGAR also needs to be.
But we get a PDF from. The trouble with the AGAR, we get a PDF. That goes to the internal auditor, has to print that off and sign it. She then has to scan it. I then have to print that off. It has to be signed through a meeting. The AGAR is exempt, as that's what I've been told at the moment.
Because it's not signed in the PDF.
Yeah. It has to be printed off and signed.
So which means it's scanned, not uploaded.
Yeah.
So,
Because you've got pictures of people's signature, which you can't.
Yeah.
so when does moving to the new world start? Did that start? On the
We
first
started
April?
already. We started exporting and changing the way that we put the minutes.
Yeah.
After tonight, this will be my first meeting of doing it. Lisa's already done it, but this will be my first.
So I believe that the other one of the other key questions is around our compliance with the transparency requirements.
Mhm.
And you can confirm that all of the documents that are required to have any transparency are on the website.
Yes, as far as I'm aware, yeah. I do need to go through it, but everything needed for the internal and external auditor is on. The audit is on there.
Thanks.
I was just getting slightly confused about all of these documents being exported, printed off, signed, whatever. I mean, Adobe does have a product now that simply allows you to sign it electronically.
Can't do that for the AGAR. Has to come off because it has to come to a meeting and you have to sign and put yes.
So that's not an option then.
Yeah.
I was trying to-
Yeah.
It might simplify things for you, but it doesn't.
I understand it has to be wet signature. It's called, electronic signature.
Okay.
So, any other questions on the social plan? Well, in that case, we'll be asked to consider the IT policy. Our previous question was, we don't need to make a decision. I don't think this is committee's.
Well, I'm hoping that you're going to recommend it for approval of full council.
Right, so we're being asked to consider it, so the recommendation.
Mhm.
And I've read through the thing, and it's one of those policies in my view that's a mixture of just an overview, because too much detail restricts us to a degree that might not be practical. However, I think it is detailed enough where it needs to be detailed enough, and I think it's an overview enough where it is enough. So I'm happy with the policy, but are there any questions from FGP? Max?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. These things are very difficult to write in the sense that you've got to balance an appropriate level of detail, but also make the document legible and understandable. My concern is really number 15 right at the bottom. It's policy, 30, my mistake. Training. All users will receive appropriate IT security and data protection training. It all very much hinges on that because I'm taking things at random. Keeping passwords secure, do not share them. That requires training. Lock devices well unattainable. Use strong passwords. Well, what's a strong password? Unless you've given training and told what a strong password is, well, we know what a strong password is. So my question really is, what training provision do we have?
NCAL offer GDPR courses, data protection courses.
Do we require staff to do those?
They can do them. I don't force them to do them.
Well, that's the issue. So, in the environment in which I work, every member of staff is forced to do it. You have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It is a requirement.
Given the risks, that actually probably not a bad idea. Actually.
And it only takes necessarily 30 minutes to do
Yeah.
a stream course. But the point is that then the employer can point to the fact that A, they've required this, and B, they've monitored the fact that people have done it within a certain time.
That can easily be done because we've got Peninsula. We've
It's
got
about
all of the
having
online
your
training
and
on it.
everybody else's factor on it, yeah.
I think that would be incredibly useful to do. Really good. And it probably actually ought to be in the policy. The board users, all staff will be required to complete data protection training. It does raise a question in my mind about objections.
Does the IT policy only apply to staff?
No, it doesn't.
And so, my question is going to be,
Do we need training?
my question is going to be, can we require councillors to enter GDPR training? Or is it something we can only ask?
I think the problem is that we can require staff because they're employees.
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult. We can recommend it and make a provision for it for councillors. I think it would be very difficult to enforce it on councillors.
You do have a budget, right?
Yeah.
And what councillors need to know is much more limited in a way. They've got to protect their own. Essentially, councillors primarily have access to SharePoint and email, very little else. So that they've got to be required to understand the protection issues around those things in particular.
The councillors also cannot load documents to the council website. And if the document were uploaded, it contained a bug.
Well, dare I say it, I don't think councillors should be able to upload things to the council website. They should send them to the
Upload onto what?
onto the show.
Yeah, that can happen.
well,
Uploading onto the share portal.
yeah, but the council shouldn't be able to do it. In my view.
Oh, right.
Creating a lot of work for the staff if everything we do all right has to be done by member staff.
Maybe it's a discussion for another day. The difference is that the extent to which you can require employees to do things is very different from what you can require from volunteers, which are effectively councillors. And there is a danger that a councillor could update something onto the SharePoint site, possibly in an area that's not protected, that's open, all sorts of things, which is completely enough to get appropriate, either from a financial point of view, from a policy point of view, whatever it might be.
Maybe that's given that we need to do this for, do we need to do this for next month or for?
I'd like to get it done. I'd like to get it done next week.
My
because I
suggestion
think-
would be that we amend the policy to say staff will be required to, and councillors are recommended to undertake appropriate training.
That would be on the two, I guess. Sorry to prolong this, Chair. The other thing is, David may be able to help me here. I thought once I was sitting next to the councillor and they said, oh, this was bought, they had a laptop or whatever, a tablet, and they said, oh, this is bought by council. Only councillors have equipment being bought by council.
There was, a number of years ago, councillors were provided with computer tablet.
We were on the asset register a couple of months ago.
Well, that
The
also,
reality is that by now, every one of them would have died.
well,
And you couldn't get them up there.
why
And
would
we've
we
never
never
replaced them.
I
So
would suggest they write a handbook back in or something like that, because otherwise I'm spent 2.2.
They have been. They're in a locker at the moment
Okay,
for me to decide what to do with.
yeah, fine.
But you can't do anything with them. You can't get
Like
into them.
Amnesty on the 25th.
Because otherwise you're going to have another slippery
So
slope.
along to that.
Right, I've changed that. Say staff will be required to have training on IT security and data protection, and councillors will be recommended to have the training.
Cyber Essentials, I've mentioned it before. Is it part of the policy? Cyber Essentials is basically the government's recommendation.
Well, we've got
Small
cyber
organisation.
security insurance through our insurance
Yes.
company.
But you know what it's like when houses broke into, paying it. So Cyber Essentials basically is a government sort of initiative for small organisations to, stop hacking in the first place. And it is something I'd recommend. It doesn't have to be in policy right now, but I think it's something we should investigate.
They're constantly monitoring that though, because we had that issue where they'd found various different things that took me a long time to get sorted out, but did. And at the moment, we've not got anything.
Who manages our cybersecurity?
I've forgotten the name of the company.
Sorry.
I've forgotten the name, but it was through our insurance company.
Right. But I remember this, they undertook a review and said, fine.
Mhm.
Your point is still a good one in that there is cybersecurity is not really a thing. I don't think it's a policy matter. Unless other councils
Mhm.
disagree. I think it's a policy matter. I think it's something that should be brought up and perhaps we can make the notes as part of the minutes that there's an action contact looking into in cyber, what's it called again, Mike?
Cyber Essentials.
Cyber Essential. We can have a look at cyber
Mhm.
essentials. I don't think it affects the policy. So with that one exception, are we happy that we as a committee recommend the IT policy to the council? Yeah. Right. James? Mike? Thanks.
I still have certain concerns that we could be talking about this all night, so I'm trying to be brief. The extent to which councillors can access from any computer pretty much in the world the SharePoint site is in itself problematic. It's problematic from a security point of view, in the sense that it also contributes, it says very clearly on the data breach policy, and the town council takes security of personal data seriously, computers are password protected.
Are you still there, Jim?
I don't think-
I've moved on to the data breach policy,
Right,
because
so
it's all-
talk about the IT
but they're
policy.
kind of all interconnected.
They are, and I'll point out as
Yeah.
a separate thing that gets to data policy. Just considering the IT policy now, James.
Can I suggest that we recognise that potentially all of these documents are not perfect, but given that we have an objective to be able to sign the ADAR, we need something.
Mhm.
And all of these documents are sufficient in that regard. And just as last year, when we revised the standing orders and the financial regulations, we accepted them in May on pretty much that basis, and then a work stream was put in place to go and really spend the time that is necessary. So rather than try and produce perfection now, where I don't think we're going to achieve it, is it perhaps a shortcut to say they are sufficient for the moment, recognising that perhaps a work stream needs to happen that polishes them.
Exactly right. I was going to say drafting by committees, particularly councillors perhaps haven't had the time or space to consider almost being both. This is not going to do that.
Well, just picking up on that point, we could say, yes, we adopt the policy and we'll review it within the next 6 months,
Mhm.
which gives us time to see it's in operation, and then we could either approve it as is, or it might be want to amend it. So if we actually build a time limit to the approval, so to speak.
I think that's a good suggestion. David. My only question was maybe our only requirement should be that somebody takes that responsibility. Because if David used to say we will, but if nobody takes that responsibility, we won't.
I'm okay with that, with the IT policy, because I wrote it. The other two came from NCALP. So, and that was all part of the GDPR that we signed up to. So I wouldn't, I've only put them on here because we haven't looked at them since 2018. And I just thought perhaps we ought to just acknowledge that we have the,
I'll go for these policy from the up to date.
Yeah. 2018.
So I'm going to take yours again. I'm going to suggest that we do exactly what David's suggested. But I need to put a name to come back to this committee with any changes. And are you happy to do that?
What, for the IT policy?
The IT policy.
Well, considering I wrote it, you're telling me to go away and rewrite it?
I'm telling you to perhaps outside this meeting ask the committee. what
Okay.
changes
Mhm.
they want to make. Because I want to read the committee. Matt's raised very good points. Others have raised very good points. Let's not do it now. Let's accept the policies as they are now. That would be my recommendation. I would hope, and what would you say? I would hope this committee can agree to council, subject to their review and report back by the clerk by October FGP. James.
Make clear the partnership between the elected members of the officer. I think it should be the clerk and the mayor.
Which mayor?
Well,
The mayor
Which
as
one?
an estimate at the time.
okay, I am going to move on because we spent all this time on this. So that's the recommendation. I'm asking the council this recommendation to full council to accept all of its policies, subject to review by the clerk. And elected member by-
Is that just the IT policy?
Because the other two are taken straight from the.
Yeah.
Are we happy with that?
We're happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll email them separately about my concerns.
James?
So this is, as it is, I've just changed that one line. It's going to go for approval. Okay.
With that recommendation, so that we.
Yeah.
Item 254306, to receive information related to payment for our roof hires and
Which,
All right. So where are we now? Sorry.
We're on item 254306, to receive information related to payment for one of our room hires. This is from your screen.
There isn't anything, there's one particular payment which we put through, which was for the hire of people's baskets who had the room downstairs.
Yeah.
I set up the payment, everyone authorised the payment, ready to go. Trying to put the payment through without some kind of additional immunity bank saying the maintenance of this site is down. You can accept the payment or not. I decided not. Tried again the next day, same error. Contacted Barclays and they said they'll get back to me. They didn't get back to me. I tried again a couple of weeks later. They were going to get back to me. They didn't. Tried again. They were going to get someone else to get back to me and they haven't. So rather than leave it as an amount outstanding not being paid and reconciled on the bank, keep all the accounts tidy for the rest of the year to put it back onto their account as a credit. But at the moment, you've got it on your list of payments as it's been paid.
So the recommendation is that we work that way.
It was already written back ready. So at the moment, they have an amount on their account. Whenever they contact us, you already authorised it.
So what's the recommendation?
The most important thing is you're aware of it.
Yeah, it's
You
just,
authorise it.
yeah, because it's in the list of payments, and if ever, let's say, the auditor looked at that one and then looked that they hadn't gone out of the account, they might query it. So that's
So my question really was incorrect because I was part reading 4307, which is to recommend. So I'm wondering why I'm recommending it. We're not recommending it, receiving information. Information received, no questions. Wonderful. I'll now move on to the item I was reading. 254307 to recommend to all council that PTC takes a complete review of activities to demonstrate value for money. James, this is you.
It is. So, over the past 12 months, I have come to understand that this council, quite rightly, is hugely focused on maintaining value for money for the elector and minimising increases to the precept. Rather than the budget process suffering huge pressure where the officers recommend expenditure and then the value for money discussion happens, I thought it appropriate to actually authorise the clerk to engage with suppliers and the elected members throughout the year with a view of over the next 18 months, so in time for 2 budget processes time, to review and gain clarity from the elected members about what it is that they want the council to do, to what level and what standard, and how much they're prepared to pay for it. And if over the next 18 months, full council receives a series of questions and makes a series of decisions, then in 18 months' time, when the budget is next reviewed, there should be no question over, oh, why are we spending money on this? Because they made the decision to do that. And so I put that, I suppose that that's a sensible thing for us to do. Personally, I think F&GP probably has the authority to just say that's something we ought to do because it's a financial thing. But because it will go across all committees, you know, we'll be asking the marketing committee, be sure that you're doing everything that you need to do. Estates, we'll be sure that everything the estates does is necessary. I think it would be better to come from full council with full council's complete knowledge and agreement to say, yes, this is something that we do want to spend time on and we do want to make those decisions.
So, any question from the, before we go to Emma, does any of the committee member have any questions of James on that question?
My only concern is how we identify every activity, because at one level it could be answering the telephone so and so as opposed to a generic activities. It's how the danger is that I agree with it in principle, but it can't be so onerous that it becomes counterproductive. It's got to have that balance.
If I may respond to
Yes,
that.
please.
In discussing it with Clark, we we discussed exactly that point about it not becoming onerous. And in essence, it's a way of capturing each challenge that comes forward. You know, why are we paying for that? Well, let's just quickly review why we're doing that. And if we can get the whole council to agree, then that's a decision that's been taken. So a way of identifying the things that you might need to review is everything that we're currently paying for. So if we can identify a bill, let's just review that those are all appropriate and things that we want to continue doing and therefore paying for. Within the internal aspects of it, it could be things like, do we want the staff to continue providing support for operating the Queen Victoria Hall, which will include a whole load of things like answering the telephone and taking people round and blah, 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 blah. But it's something that we clearly do, that clearly takes up time of our staff, and we may have an opinion about whether we wish them to continue doing that.
Yeah, no, that's fine, as long as the tail doesn't wag the dog. You know, I've seen these exercises undertaken in other institutions, and the danger is that they become
and ends in themselves. I think the challenge I've got is we sat down last year, it was last year, and we agreed 5 strategic goals. I think in full council debating this, there need to be cognizant of requirements, which I'll come to in a second. But also, given that the strategy is partly about the allocation of scarce resource, I would be miffed, disappointed if this were taken on to the detriment of one of the other strategic goals, without council being aware of which goal is being serving to this goal. If we bring this in, it's going to take a lot of time to park, it will take a lot of time to start, and we've got 4 and 5 other strategic goals that have already been agreed. So which of those is being lessened?
But I think to say it's a separate new task is to, from my perspective and my 12 months of watching the council operate, this is something that the council is doing already. It challenges itself on a regular basis about why are we doing this. You know, the budget process, to my perspective, took longer than it needed to if the council was clear in its objectives, because it was reviewing things on the basis of price and whatever else. So I'm not sure that this is an extra thing. It's a thing, it's taking control of an activity this is happening anyway, i.e. challenge to spend, and merely giving, rather than it happening at budget time, in a concentrated 2 months of everybody running around trying to justify why the budget is the budget. If we can move some of that effort to other times, it actually makes budget time easier without necessarily diverting from anything that we wouldn't have otherwise done.
Second, except that things like electricity providing with 10 machinery, that's operational, they also start time and might be spent on that. So I'll come to Max, then I'll come to your response, and I'll get them to you. Thanks.
Yeah, I still support this very much in principle. I very much appreciate what James is trying to achieve through this, and I think it will benefit both the employees within the council and the councillors as well, being able to justify why we spend money on what we do. So I fully support that, and I'm happy to agree this document pretty much as it is. The only thing I would like to perhaps either add to it or maybe put a bit more detail on it, is I do think it would help if, as a starting point of the process, and I will probably be there at the time when that process is started, that the mayor, the town clerk, and James, the proposer, sit down and actually put some flesh around this. So, for example, when I've undertaken something like this in a different institution, we kind of actually started by trying to define what we thought the activities were. And that in itself is actually quite a useful exercise. And so it's a way of which you then start with a broad remit, but then we work out the processes and find the focus.
That makes sense to me. And have you got anything to
Only that, I'm happy, for this to happen, but I don't, and I've already spoken to James about this, I don't see myself having any time to even consider this until summer, late summer.
come back on contract allocation of scarce resource in engineers? I don't see this as being in any way in conflict with the sort of strategy programme, something seen as overarching at the top of it, and maybe feeding back down into it. What sort of does worry me a little bit, though, I was being sympathetic with the aim, it's something like that. The devil, as they say, is in the detail. When I look at the first bit, which says the clerk will be authorised to convene a working party. Well, that raises two questions. One, the clerk's half answered. It's not going to be easy for her to find time. And secondly, where does the working party come from? Is it envisaged that the working party is within staff? Is it envisaged that it is councillors? How is the clerk to select the working party, or are they going to volunteer? There are all these questions about mechanics, so I kind of agree with Max that perhaps we need to put some flesh on this first, which will allow a certain amount of time to pass with them sort of fretting quietly in the background, thinking this is doing everything in due course. But at least when it comes back, it might be easier to see how it can be made to work. James.
I absolutely support Max's thoughts, Bill's thoughts. They are similar to how I probably saw it going, but didn't want to be too prescriptive in saying this is how it will definitely happen in fiscal. You might have all had really good ideas that were completely different. To reassure you about what my thoughts about what this will be focusing on, it's not about going out and re-tendering the electricity. It's about deciding whether or not you want to do the thing that requires the electricity. Now, in terms of electricity, any building that we've got needs electric. You don't even need to look at that. At some point, yes, you could go along and make sure you are getting the best value out of electricity, but I'm confident that the officers are doing that part. The bit that I'm not sure that the elected members have done is really review what they've asked the clerk to do on a weekly, annual basis to be sure that we do want to keep doing all of those things. And I completely support Max's idea in terms of what my thoughts were that let's get this idea in place before May. It will then go into hiatus during May, and whilst all the new appointees are appointed, but it will be ready for them to pick up, and people who perhaps take over committee ships or committee chairs will know that there is this thing that perhaps will be asked of them, and it may colour those that do or do not wish to have anything to be involved with it. So there is no thought that this will really impinge on Emma before the summer, absolutely. But I do like Max's idea of if the councillors, with Emma's permission, want to get started in producing a list of all the things that we think we've asked her to do, so that when we do have some time, we can start sitting down and go, well, we think you run the QBH. Do we still want to ask you to do that? We think you mow all the grass around the place. Is that something that we want to continue on to do, or do we want to go to no mow banks or whatever? But it will be on a list of things that we have thought.
From a practical perspective, what is your thought about how what we're doing this document? Are you suggesting that the changes suggested by Max and David are weaved into that, and then that goes with amendments to April from council.
If the committee is so minded that the concept is only supportable with detail about how it will be delivered, then I'm happy to amend it. I personally would prefer to leave it as the concept, because, and then again, if we in 2 months' time think, oh, there's a better way of doing this, we would have to come back to council and say, can we please do it a different way?
So my thought and suggestion to you, because this is your document, that you make it clear that it's an overarching principle that you're seeking to have approved by the council, and that you will, in the paragraph that's at the bottom there that's being shown, you will work with the clerk to agree a process through which this happens, rather than have the debate now or have the debate next week. Just make it one principle that's agreed, and the actual detail will come through when the clerk is ready to have that discussion with you or whoever is leading this work. Happy with that? I'll presume everyone's happy with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So will you be able to rewrite that so by Wednesday, tomorrow? So that we can send it out to the council next week? Or?
Is this committee approving that it wishes to recommend to full council? Because if we aren't, then I'm not bothering.
Well, I looked around the room, I think the members of consent.
We took an implicit vote. Yes.
We can make a call if you like, yes. And we're going to move on then to item 2544, grant application 2544-1, to consider grant application for the Vintage Festival. Max, you have discussed this at the previous meeting.
Yeah, you're not making money out of it, are you?
You can say, we can both say, just
Can you confirm, Clark, that we would still be for it without these two?
1, 2.
Yes, three.
So, you're asking me to take the chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a proposal here from Philip Ounce, who many people know, on behalf of the Vintage Festival Committee. Just to remind you of some background context, we saw an earlier version of this at the last finance meeting of 2025. And we discussed it there. We have various concerns, partly because we actually couldn't read some of the original application because it was handwritten and had various marginalia and arrows pointing to it, very difficult to understand. And also we were a little unclear about some of the financial information. And therefore it was agreed at that meeting, which I chaired, that we would go back to Philip Ounce and ask him to clarify a number of things, which I did at the beginning of this calendar year, and this is the result of that. I think I should also say that although I sent quite a long email to him outlining our concerns, some of them have clearly been addressed, but I think there are other issues that remain, and one issue in particular that I think I need to draw people's attention to is a contradiction between what it says on the Vintage Festival website and what it actually says in the application. I'll preface that by saying also that my personal view is that the Vintage Festival, I think, is something that's incredibly good for Oundle. And Oundle Business Association, of which the Vintage Festival is part, is also an incredibly valuable and respected part of the town. And I would generally want to be seen to support what they're doing. But I think there is an issue that needs to be sorted out around the finances. It says on the Oundle Festival website, it says, quotes, the OVF will pass funds after each vintage festival to OTC, whose Finance and General Purpose Committee will take responsibility for processing applications and deciding on awards based on a set of criteria. Which means, if I read that correctly, that the amount that is specified in the document, where they made something like 2,800, I think it was, pounds last year, whatever it is, the 11,000 minus the 8.2,000, should have been received by us. It has not. It gets even more complicated than that. This is why John, I think, has taken himself out of the meeting, is that they promised to pay some money regarding the installation of a screen in QVH, but that only amounts to about £300. So where's the other 2,500 that should have been paid to us according to their website? It gets even more complicated because, as John was indicating, which is probably why if you wanted to step back, is that they've already made an announcement that they're going to spend the profit from 2026 on further improvements in QVH. Well, that's not what it says on their website. It says very clearly on the website that the money comes back here so that we can decide how it is best rechanneled through the community fund. So I think it's a very worthy application. I think the Vintage Festival, as I said, is something that we really should be seen to be supporting. I think OVA, again, is a very credible organisation we should be supporting. What I would recommend to members of this committee is that if we do feel minded to support it, we should do it with the condition that they do what they say on their website, and that is to pay any surpluses made by the Vintage Festival to OTC, so that we can decide, as a legal state, on how the money is spent. James.
I'm a bit nervous about providing funds to an organisation whose total reserves are twice the cost of the project that they are undertaking. And I feel perhaps they don't need our assistance, and our assistance should be targeted on those organisations who are less well, or less securely funded. And if they, for any reason, fall below a threshold, given that one of our criteria is an explanation of the purpose of your reserve funds if it exceeds £5,000 or 50% of annual expenditure, both of which it does, and no explanation is given. I don't think they need our money, and if we're giving them money for it to just come back to us so that we can give it out to other people, I think we can cut out the middleman and just give it straight to the other people.
Yeah, if I can just respond to that, because that was one of the issues I think was brought up in part last time. I asked Philip Ants about this, and one of the problems is that the Vintage Festival does not have a separate bank account. So when they talk about this reserve of 19,000, where it's in there somewhere, you put in whatever you said, 32,000, that's the OVA reserve. Okay. And essentially, technically, it's not there to underpin the Vintage Festival. The point is that Vintage Festival is a standalone and separate project. And why it's very confusing is that it goes through, and you could argue that it shouldn't be doing this anyway, through the OVA's bank account. That was the explanation that was given to me. Thank you. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't realise that. That's not telling the truth. That's somebody else's money that they're saying is their reserve.
Well, it's the reserve of OVA.
Yeah, but when you look at, if we did that on any other grant application, it'd be thrown out. You know, that's wrong.
This is why we had these, shall we say, these questions last time around. I posed those questions to Philip. He's answered, I think, some of them. But again, he clarified straight away that the problem is that Vintage Festival doesn't have a separate bank account. It's all done through OVA, and the reserves are those of OVA. I'm just telling you what.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, David. I didn't see you.
Well, I must admit, I had indeed written down a reserve figure of 32,857 for pence, because I had exactly the same concerns that Councillor Outback had. There's no doubt it's a valuable part of the town's heritage for this. We've mentioned it a couple of times. But it's something important, and I can see why, as a council, we should back it. The question, in a sense, is does that backing have to be financial? It seemingly made a profit for the last time it's operating, forgetful then issues about where it shouldn't have gone. But I couldn't see anything in the application that told me why they needed the money. And even if that reserve figure is an OVA reserve figure, presumably some element of that relates to the festival. We have no information about that. And I don't feel that we're in a position to make a decision at this point in relation to this application. I'm conscious of the fact that the event is in the middle of next month. So, on the face of it, one opportunity that the applicant has to deal with this matter is to come to full council next week, be available for questioning by councillors, have the information available, and let full council make a decision next week. I'm not prepared to vote for it tonight.
So if I can just maybe address that, David. I mean, again, sorry, I appreciate that you would not have seen the correspondence between myself and Philip Ants, but I said in an earlier email to Philip Ants prior to him revising it, I said specifically the cost of the project is circa 15,000, as it was in the first situation. It's now gone down to 10,000 all of a sudden, somehow, anyway. But it would have helped to have had a draft budget for the 2026 event to better understand why this money is critical to the running of the event. For example, are you actually planning to make a surplus? This is not clear from the application. My point is that I think I'm kind of saying there, or trying to say there, David, what you just said, which is, well, why do you actually need this money? It's not clear why you need this money. And I still don't think they've actually answered that fundamental question. Jake?
So I believe they told us what they would spend it on, but not why they need
Yes.
our money
Yeah,
to be able to
absolutely.
do that. The fact that their reserves are held in a larger fund should not preclude them from knowing precisely how much of it is theirs. So the fact that you're using a particular account does not prevent you from having accounts. So without them being absolutely clear about why they need the money and what their reserves are, I think the answer actually today should not just be we can't take a decision, but no. But as David said, if we would welcome, we absolutely support the initiative, and if our funds are necessary, vital, whatever, we are we will receive a complete application from them, and if they get it in time for next week, we will consider it a full house. That would be what I would.
Can I slightly modify it? Only just because I'm thinking of the practicalities of them trying to do that and to tell them that they need to do it. And it just isn't time. There is an application. What's lacking is the detail. So I don't require them to put another application in. All I want is somebody to turn up here with the information at their fingertips so that they can tell us what we want to know in order to make a decision. And if they want to come and make their pitch, fine. If they don't come and make their pitch, you can't want that.
Okay, so let me try and sum up so we can move on. It's approaching 9 o'clock. So I think what I'd like to propose or recommend is that the current application is rejected, but we invite them, should they wish to attend, it's going to be a very crowded meeting, full council meeting next week, in order to answer questions that we have.
So if I may amend your thing slightly, it's not rejected, it's not approved.
Yeah.
So you don't have to realise.
Yeah.
It is not approved on the basis that it is incomplete
Yeah.
in the following regards. So, i.e., they don't say why they need the money, they don't say what their actual reserves are, and if they would like us to give the money, they need to turn up.
Okay, yeah. So I'm happy to second that amended proposal. All those in favour? Right. Did you capture that, Emma?
Well, a little bit,
Okay.
Which is
if I'm honest. Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm handing now quickly back to you, John.
Thank you. So we're on to item 254402 to consider the grant application for cricket club. And they're provided accounts,
Yes.
which are I think, correct. They've also provided a detailed proposal, and they've even provided a picture of it to spend money on. So, any questions or comments, please, on the grant application for the cricket club? No questions or comments? We're happy to propose that we accept it. Okay, before we move to second that, does anybody have any comments? James?
Can we confirm that the relevant, I'm not sure which budget line that would come from, can we confirm that it is sufficient for the amount that we wish to spend?
We get budget?
Because there are a number of good causes lines, and it was
The budget was incredibly overspent last year.
That's, so that's showing what we paid before. I'm not sure. Got it. It's like the actual budget.
26, 27.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is the budget.
10,000.
By the time you've taken out the CAB money, there's £8,715 left.
Good, thank you. So we'll be asked to spend £900 out of £8,000 to support the bicentenary of the cricket club and the hope that they can get the people along. So, any questions or comments?
You've got a proposal.
I've got a proposal. I'm just asking if there are questions or comments before we move to the next stage. None. Do I have a seconder for? Thank you. All those in favour? Unusual. Carried.
So the CAB one was how, 4 just,
The CABs was 11
11th.
or 12, just on.
Yeah, 11th.
CAB was 11,300.
Thank you. So we've got about 8 and a bit left, of which was about 900.
We're about 7,800 left now.
Thank you.
2 weeks into the new year.
Does that include the arts grants as well? That's just community. Mm. So we've got arts separate.
So things like LFMG.
Yeah.
In terms of cricket, we've given them 3,200 over the past 18 years.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the last time was 2023.
The motion's been carried, so those to be made and approved. We move on to item 2545, any other business for report only? James? Max?
No.
And none for me either. In which case, I will declare this meeting closed at 9 o'clock.